By the time I pointed the remote at his TV, my wife had already gone pale. Todd, our charming next-door neighbor, just kept smiling like this was a game night instead of an ambush. His girlfriend sat between them, bare feet tucked up on the couch, totally clueless. On the screen behind me was a paused slideshow of screenshots and one very short video from my side yard camera. The room smelled like Cabernet and cheap cologne. My heart was doing double time, and I had to decide exactly how hard I was about to blow up 3 lives in one go. To understand how I ended up in my neighbor's living room playing amateur prosecutor, you gotta rewind about 18 months. I am 33, work as an industrial electrician, and I'm one of those boring people who actually likes having their life together. I bought my little 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet cul-de-sac on the edge of town when I was 30, fixed it up on weekends, and treated my credit score the way some guys treat their classic cars. My wife, Kara, is 31, works in marketing for a local home decor chain, and when we met, she was this mix of sharp sarcasm and easy laughter that hooked me from the first drink. We met at a trivia night downtown. I was there with my buddy Liam from work, she was there with a group of coworkers, and we got thrown on the same team because the bar was packed and nobody else wanted to sit near the speakers. She made fun of my old band t-shirt. I made fun of her insisting on ordering wine at a dive bar, and by the end of the night she had my hoodie on and my number in her phone. The first couple of years together were simple in that stupidly sweet way. We did late-night drives just to get ice cream, binged bad shows, argued about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, and slowly merged our lives. No kids, by choice and not by tragedy. Our stance was maybe someday, but not until we both actually wanted to give up sleeping in on weekends and spontaneous road trips. We got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, then had a backyard reception at my house with fairy lights and a rented taco truck, exactly the low-drama, low-debt celebration I wanted. If you had told me back then I'd end up playing detective over wine nights with the guy next door, I would have laughed you back to your Uber. Our street was mostly couples in their late 20s and early 30s. No kids yet. Lots of dogs, lots of joggers, lots of Amazon packages on porches. Liam, the same guy from trivia, lived 2 houses down and across with his longtime girlfriend Jenna. They became our default hangout people. Fire pits in my driveway, board games at theirs, that easy revolving door kind of friendship that makes a neighborhood feel like an adult dorm. Then, about a year after Kara and I got married, Todd and his girlfriend Nina moved into the house between ours and Liam's place. Todd was early to mid-30s, tall, gym guy, but with the whole, I know wine and indie bands you've never heard of vibe on top. Nina was a nurse working weird shifts and seemed genuinely kind, the type who shows up with cookies when she borrows a ladder. At first, it was genuinely nice having them around. Todd did the whole neighborly handshake thing the day they moved in, invited us over for burgers a week later, and made a point of learning everyone's names, even the dogs. He was one of those guys who seemed to be in his element whenever there was an audience, always telling some story about hiking in Chile or trying octopus in Japan, complete with hand gestures and just enough self-deprecation to make it go down easy. Kara took to him fast. To be fair, everybody kind of did. He was the one who started Friday night wine and hang on the deck, rotating between houses. The first few times it was all 6 of us, plus whoever else on the street wandered over. We'd sit under patio heaters, pass around cheap charcuterie, argue about music and complain about work. Todd would swirl his glass and talk tannins, Kara would roll her eyes and ask if it tasted like grapes, and I would sit there feeling that rare adult thing called content. The shift started small enough that if I were writing this as a movie, you'd miss it the first time. Nina's schedule meant there were nights she had to be at the hospital till midnight, sometimes all weekend. Todd made a big show of being supportive, but also mentioned more than once that he hated sleeping alone in a quiet house. Kara, who has a soft spot for people sounding vaguely sad, latched onto that. It began as comments like, I might pop over with a bottle when Nina's on nights, so he's not just doom-scrolling alone, said casually, while she stood in the kitchen uncorking something red. The first time she did it, I did not think much of it. I was halfway through a video game, she waved the bottle at me, kissed my cheek, and said, Going to Todd's for wine and talk? You good here? And I shrugged and told her not to wake him up too much with her terrible laugh. 90 minutes later she was back, a little flushed, talking about how lonely Nina must be working nights, and how Todd just needed someone to vent to about the stress of his job. I actually thought, nice, my wife is being a good neighbor. I grew up with parents who barely knew the people across the street. This whole little cul-de-sac ecosystem was new and good to me. But then the frequency went up. Once a month turned into once a week. Wine and talk became a standing thing whenever Nina's car was gone. Kara started putting more effort into how she looked right before going next door. Subtle stuff at first, lip gloss for just hanging out, the nice leggings instead of the ratty pajama pants, the perfume she usually saved for date nights with me. I remember sitting at my desk one evening, finishing a report, watching her move from our bedroom mirror to the hallway, touching up her eyeliner, and joking, "You know it is literally 10 steps to his front door, right? Not a club downtown." And she laughed and said, "He has dimmer switches. I have standards." Then grabbed the bottle and left. The joke landed weird in my chest, like swallowing a chip wrong. Liam noticed before I admitted anything to myself. One Saturday, we were in my driveway changing the brake pads on his car when he said it casually, the way you mentioned the weather, but watch someone's reaction. "Kara is pretty tight with Todd lately," he said while lining up the socket wrench. I kept my tone light. "Yeah, they talk wine and marketing crap or something. Nina is always at work. Someone's got to keep him from talking to his reflection," I said. Liam did not laugh, just glanced toward Todd's place. "Seen her over there a lot, man. Late, 1 a.m. Late. I know because I am up with insomnia and my living room window looks right at his driveway." "You cool with that?" he asked. That was the moment my stomach actually dropped. There is a split second between hearing something and the story you have been telling yourself rearranging around it. I forced a shrug. "She tells me. Nina knows. It is a weird schedule thing." "It is fine," I said. Liam nodded like he heard me, but his face said something else. "Just keep your eyes open," he said quietly. After that, it was like someone had taken a highlighter to all the things I had been ignoring. Kara's phone, which used to live face up on the coffee table, started living face down and locked with a new passcode. She took it with her everywhere, even when she went to take the trash out or pee. She would be mid-conversation with me, screen light up, and her entire attention would shift toward the device in her hand, her expression doing this tiny soften she did when she was really into something. When I glanced over once, I saw Todd's name at the top of a notification before she swiped it away. Days she was not going over, they were texting. She laughed at her phone a lot. When I asked what was funny, she would say, "Meme Todd sent, work stuff, not that interesting," and flip the screen away from me. She developed this habit of saying, "You are being weird," whenever I asked simple questions. "What time did you get home last night?" turned into, "Why are you interrogating me like I am on trial?" "You were out till 1:30, turned into, "Do you want a GPS report too, or can you trust me like an adult?" Every small thing I asked about got turned back on me as insecurity. And because I did not want to be the jealous husband stereotype, I kept backing off. I told myself stories. She would not cheat. She hates cheaters. She told me about her dad cheating on her mom and swore she would never be that person. Todd is a friend. I am being paranoid. Humans are Olympic-level storytellers when we are scared of the truth. The night I really cracked was a Thursday. Kara claimed she was heading over around 9 and would be home by 11. I had an early morning job, so I crashed at 10:30, woke up at 1:15 with that weird wired feeling you get when you nap too hard, and realized the bed was still half empty. The house was dark, her car in the driveway. I checked my phone, no text, then pulled up our doorbell camera app more out of boredom than suspicion. The front feed was empty, but I had recently installed a cheap side yard camera after a package went missing. That one was pointed between our house and Todd's, more as a deterrent for porch pirates than anything. I thumbed over to that feed and caught her in the grainy black and white recording, timestamp 1:07 a.m., walking from his back gate toward our side door. She was barefoot, heels in her hand, hair a mess in the kind of way that does not come from just talking. She paused at the door, leaned back against it, and I watched her pull her phone out, type something, and then smile at the screen for a second before slipping inside. I hit replay 3 times. My heart was hammering, but my brain was weirdly calm, like a switch had been flipped from maybe to figure it out. I could hear her brushing her teeth in the bathroom, humming like nothing was wrong, while I lay there staring at the ceiling and feeling my chest alternately go hot and icy. In the morning, she came into the kitchen in an oversized hoodie like every other day. "You were out late," I said, trying to sound casual while pouring coffee. She yawned. "We got talking about Nina's schedule and his job, lost track of time." "Chill, Dad," she said. "You know you can text me if you are going to be that late," I replied. "I did not want to wake you up." "Why are you making a thing out of it?" she shot back. That was the first time I looked at her and thought, you are lying to my face without even blinking. Once you have that thought, you cannot go back. The next break in the armor came not from cameras but from the fact that tech companies assume you own 3 devices. We had an old iPad in the kitchen we basically only used for recipes and Netflix. It used to be mine. I signed out of everything when I gave it to her, but apparently at some point she had logged her iMessage account into it and forgotten. A few days after the barefoot walk of shame video, I was making dinner, tablet propped up, when a little blue notification banner popped down from the top of the screen. Todd's name, preview of the message. Still thinking about your mouth on me last night, you are trouble, followed by a winking emoji. I froze, wooden spoon halfway to the pan. Another bubble popped up. You sure he did not hear anything from next door? Followed by the laughing emoji. I set the spoon down, hands suddenly slick. My rational brain said, walk away, you do not want to know. The rest of me picked up the tablet and slid down the banner. Her entire thread with Todd bloomed into view. I do not know how long I stood there reading. Long enough for the vegetables on the stove to start burning. There were weeks and weeks of messages, a mix of normal neighbor talk and increasingly explicit flirting, morphing into full-blown sexting and logistics. Them talking about how good it was that our houses share a wall so I can sneak out without anyone noticing. How wine and talk had moved from the deck to his couch to his bed. There were references to specific nights I remembered watching Netflix alone while she was helping Nina with wedding planning. Jokes about me snoring. About how I have no idea what is happening 10 feet away on the other side of drywall. At one point, there was a selfie of them together in his kitchen, her sitting on the counter in one of Todd's hoodies, hair wet like she had just showered there, his hand on her thigh. They both looked smug. It was not the most graphic message thread in history, but it might as well have been. What gutted me more than the sexual stuff was the way she talked about me little digs. He is so predictable. He would never cheat because he is terrified of losing control. He is fine, but you make me feel alive. It was like reading a review of myself written by someone who had stayed at my hotel for years and then decided to rate it 2 stars because the pillows were too firm. I took screenshots of everything. My hands were shaking but methodical. Scroll, capture, scroll, capture. I airdropped them to my laptop, then deleted the message app from the iPad and turned the heat off under the pan. When Kara came home that night, I told her I had overcooked dinner and we ordered takeout instead. I sat across from her at the table watching her laugh at some show on her phone, knowing I had concrete proof in a folder on my desktop, and I said nothing. Not yet. The next call I made was to Liam. I walked over to his place under the pretense of borrowing a drill bit and then asked if we could talk outside. On his back deck, I handed him my phone with the screenshot album open. I watched his face go from confused to hard as he scrolled. You sure you want me to see all this? He asked quietly. Too late now, I said. He exhaled slowly. Shit, man, I am so sorry. I had a bad feeling, but damn, he said. We sat in silence for a minute, listening to someone's sprinkler ticking away 2 houses down. What are you going to do? He asked. I am not going to yell first and think later, I said, though my whole body wanted to break something. I am going to talk to a lawyer, lock down finances, and then I am going to make them answer for it. Both of them. And I want it on record that Todd does not get to play nice guy on this street while he is screwing the neighbor's wife behind his girlfriend's back, I said. Liam nodded. Whatever you need, I am in, he said. Over the next week, I quietly turned my life into a spreadsheet. I met with a divorce attorney on my lunch break, laid everything out, and found out that because I had bought the house before marriage and we had never put her name on the deed, the house was mine. Our prenup, which we had signed at her insistence because she once said she did not want to get screwed if you went crazy and gambled the house away, ironically protected me more than her. My retirement accounts were separate. The only real joint things were a checking account, a small shared savings, and a credit card. On my attorney's advice, I opened a new account in just my name, redirected my paycheck, and left the joint account with enough to cover the usual auto draft bills for a month. I pulled my credit report, changed every password that had any tie to my personal financial world, and set up 2-factor authentication. I printed out the text messages, labeled them by date, and burned the videos from my camera onto a flash drive. I was not going to be the guy whose cheating spouse flipped the story and turned it into, he is crazy, he made it up. The hardest part was not saying anything while all this was happening. Kara's behavior actually got bolder. She stayed out later, got more snappy when I asked simple questions, and one night tossed out, You know, Todd actually listens when I talk about my job, like it was some innocent comment. I was past hurt at that point and into a cold, numb clarity. Bet he does, I said, eyes on my laptop. She scoffed, grabbed her keys, and muttered something about needing a break from this mood. That was the night I also decided Nina deserved to know what was happening in the house she was helping pay for with night shifts. I debated for a few days about whether to warn her privately or blow it all up in one go. In the end, I landed on something in between. I slipped a note with my number under her door on a Sunday morning when I knew Todd was out for a run, and Kara was at the grocery store. I wrote, "Hey Nina, this is Mark from next door. I need to talk to you about something important involving Todd and my wife. Not a prank. I think you deserve to see some things I have found. Text me when you are somewhere you can talk." She texted an hour later from what turned out to be her car in the hospital parking lot. We met that evening at a coffee shop 20 minutes away, neutral ground where there was zero chance of running into our cul-de-sac people. She came in wearing scrubs, hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes, looking like someone who spends her time taking care of everyone else. I felt like a villain just sitting there. "This better not be some weird neighbor drama," she said, wrapping her hands around her cup. "I have zero bandwidth," she added. "I wish it was," I replied, and slid my laptop toward her. I had queued up the message thread, the video clip, all of it. I did not hover while she scrolled. I just stared at a spot on the wall behind her head and listened to her breathing change. She went from confused to frowning to silently crying, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "How long have you known?" she asked eventually. "About a week since I found the messages. But based on the timestamps, they have been at this for months," I said. Her jaw clenched. "He told me he was glad we did not have kids yet because we could still be spontaneous. Guess sneaking your wife into our bed counts as spontaneous," she said. We sat there a while, two strangers tied together by the same wreck. "So what now?" she asked. "For me, divorce," I said. "For you, that is your call. I figured you deserved to see it before I confronted them. I was going to do it with just the four of us, no yelling in the street. You can be there if you want. Or you cannot. I am not putting this on you to fix," I added. She stared into her coffee, then nodded. "No, I want to be there," she said quietly. "He likes to spin things. I want to hear what he says when he cannot lie his way out." That is how we landed on Thursday night for what I started calling in my head the wine night of reckoning. I told Kara that Todd and Nina had invited us over to talk about something important, and that they wanted to clear the air about some weird vibes lately. Kara looked guilty enough for half a second that I almost laughed. "What weird vibes?" she said, too quickly. "I do not know. Something about Todd feeling like we have been distant. It will be fine. Be nice neighbors, show up, drink their wine," I said. Liam insisted on coming over to my place beforehand, just in case you need backup when you come home, which is how I ended up leaving my front door unlocked, laptop under my arm, phone in my pocket, and walking the 10 steps next door knowing that nothing about my life would be the same when I walked back. Which brings us back to Todd's living room, the four of us sitting there on his gray sectional, like we are about to watch a movie instead of my marriage. Implode, Todd had poured everyone some Pinot and was laying it on thick, doing his little host routine. "Glad you guys could come by," he said, handing Kara a glass and letting his fingers linger a little too long on hers. "Things have felt a bit off on the street and I just thought, better to talk stuff out than let it fester," he added. Kara gave this tight laugh and looked anywhere except at me. Nina sat at the other end of the couch, arms folded, eyes on her wine, saying nothing. I set my laptop on the coffee table, next to the cheese plate, and picked up the remote for his smart TV. "Yeah, I agree, man," I said. "Honesty is important between neighbors," I added. Todd nodded like a motivational speaker. "Exactly, dude. So if there is anything anyone wants to get off their chest, now is the time," he said, leaning back. Nina let out this little huff of disbelief that only I seemed to catch. "Cool," I replied. "I will go first," I added, and hit the button that mirrored my laptop screen to his TV. The generic smart TV background disappeared, replaced by the first screenshot. Big blue and gray message bubbles, Todd's name at the top. The text near the middle of the screen read, "Still thinking about your mouth on me last night, you are trouble," with a timestamp. It was like dropping a grenade in a library. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Todd shot forward in his seat. "What is this?" he asked, the charm dropping out of his voice. Kara's glass clinked against the coffee table because her hands were shaking. Nina just stared at the screen, jaw clenched, eyes wet but wild. I kept my voice weirdly calm. This is your text thread with my wife starting from about 5 months ago. There is more. I highlighted some greatest hits, I said, and clicked to the next slide. Another screenshot, a different day. Kara. He is passed out. I can sneak over if you want round two. Winky face Todd. Door is open. Same hoodie. I like that one. Plus a photo of his bed with the covers pulled back. I heard Kara whisper, Mark, please, under her breath, like I was the one doing something wrong by reading their words out loud. You said be honest, Todd, I said. So this is honesty, I added. Todd tried to stand up, lunging for the laptop. Dude, this is crazy out of context, he said. I moved it out of his reach, keeping my eyes on him. What context makes I love that you taste like wine when you sneak into my shower mean anything other than what it clearly does? I asked. Nina turned her head slowly to look at him. He is going to say this is nothing, that it was just flirting, that he was drunk, she said quietly, but there was steel under it. Go on, Todd. Tell him how it is nothing, she added. Todd's mouth opened and closed. Nina, babe, listen. We were just messing around. It was emotional, like connection stuff. It did not mean anything, he stammered. I clicked again. A video from my side camera, blown up on the TV, Kara slipping out his back gate at 1 in the morning, barefoot, heels in hand. I had scrubbed the audio so all you could hear was the gate latch and her little laugh as she checked her phone. That looks pretty physical to me, I said. Kara finally broke. Mark, can we please talk about this privately? She begged, voice high and thin. You are humiliating everyone, she added. I turned to look at her directly for the first time. You humiliated me every time you walked 10 feet to his bed and then came home to mine like it was nothing, I said. You made our entire street your cover story. Wine and talk, right? Well, here we are. Wine and talk, I added. Nina set her glass down so hard the stem snapped. Red wine bled into Todd's white rug. How long? She asked, staring at him. Be specific, she added. Todd wiped his hands on his jeans like he was sweating. Couple of months, he muttered. I did not even have to say anything. The date stamps on the screen dated back almost half a year. Nina laughed once, sharp. Try again, she said, and keep in mind I am a nurse who charts everything by time and date, so I can count, she added. Kara looked between us, eyes darting like a trapped animal. It is not like that, she said. It started with just talking. We were both unhappy and we did not mean for it to go this far, she added. How far did it go? I asked, though I already knew. I wanted to hear her say it. She swallowed. We slept together a few times, she said, eyes on the floor. A few times, I repeated, scrolling through pages and pages of evidence. Right, I said. Look, I know you want to be angry, but you checked out a long time ago, she snapped suddenly, turning the blame cannon my way. You are always working. You never want to go out. You do not listen when I talk about work. You just stare at your laptop. I felt alone in our house, she said. There it was, the classic cheater script. So your solution to feeling lonely in our house was to go next door and blow him in his kitchen while her paychecks kept this place afloat? I asked, nodding toward Nina. Solid adult coping skills, I added. Todd finally tried the apology angle. Dude, I am sorry, all right? It just happened. We did not mean for it to hurt you. It was a connection thing. We never wanted it to be some big betrayal, he said. I actually laughed then, a short, humorless sound. Todd, you live 13 feet away from me. You were literally banging my wife through a shared wall and then smiling at me over the fence like we were buddies. That is not it just happened. That is a choice. Repeatedly, I said. Nina stood up. We are done, she said, voice flat, looking at Todd. Get your shit out of my house by the end of the week, she added. He stared at her, stunned. Your house, he said. My name is on the mortgage, genius. You moved in with me, remember? You are not the one working nights and holidays, she said. Then she turned to me. Thank you for telling me when you could have just torched him and let me find out years from now, she said. There was a tiny crack in her voice on the last word, but she held it together better than any of us. She brushed past Todd, told Kara quietly, You are not the girl I thought you were, and walked out. The door slammed behind her. The silence that followed had weight. Todd sank back onto the couch, suddenly small. Kara started crying, The messy kind. Mascara streaks and hiccups. "Mark, please, can we go home and talk?" she said, reaching for my arm. I pulled it away. "There is no we going home," I said. "I did my talking when I hired a lawyer last week," I added. Her eyes widened. "What?" she whispered. "You think I saw these messages and just sat on my hands?" I asked. "I have already filed for divorce. Papers will be served tomorrow. My paycheck is no longer going into our joint account. I talked to the bank. The only joint debt we have is the card you love to use for self-care, which we are splitting. The house stays with me because it was mine before you, and the prenup you insisted on says so clearly. I changed the Wi-Fi password and took your profile off the streaming accounts because I am petty like that. Your stuff will be in boxes in the guest room by the weekend. You can coordinate a time with Liam to pick it up if I'm not home, because I do not want you letting yourself into my house anymore," I said. Todd muttered, "Dude, you do not have to overreact," under his breath like a man who had never faced consequences. I turned to him. "Overreact is what you call it when the guy who trusted his wife and his neighbor does not immediately forgive you for screwing each other in secret. Losing your live-in girlfriend, a chunk of your friend circle, and access to my backyard smoker is the bare minimum consequence here," I said. Kara's crying ramped up. "So that is it. You are just throwing away 8 years together?" she asked. "No," I said. "You threw it away every time you stepped into his shower and then climbed into bed with me smelling like his soap. I am just taking out the trash," I added. It was a cruel line, I will admit, but there is a certain point where you stop editing yourself for someone who clearly never edited themselves for you. I picked up my laptop, my flash drive, and my keys. "I am done here," I said. "If either of you try to spin this with the neighbors as Mark is crazy and controlling, just remember I have timestamps and more screenshots than either of you can talk your way around," I added. Then I walked out. Liam was indeed waiting on my porch when I got back, leaning against my railing. "Well," he said quietly. "Nuclear enough for you?" he asked. I set the laptop down on the little table by the door and sat on the steps. My hands were still shaking. "We are past nuclear," I said. "I think we are in salted earth territory," I added. The next few days were a blur of logistics and fallout. The divorce attorney moved faster than I thought possible, filing the paperwork first thing the next morning. Kara was served at work, which I had mixed feelings about, but she had ignored the email asking for a good time to meet, so that is how the cookie crumbled. She blew up my phone for a while, alternating between furious and begging. "We can go to counseling. It was just a mistake. My parents are going to be devastated. How could you do this to them? If you loved me, you would at least try." I did not answer. I blocked her number after the 5th voicemail where she shifted into, "You are being dramatic. Everyone makes mistakes. You are throwing away a perfectly good marriage over one dumb thing." Todd, surprisingly, never contacted me directly. I heard his side through the grapevine because our cul-de-sac had a group chat for block parties and random updates and people talk. He apparently told a few guys that it was an emotional thing that went too far, and that Mark is a jealous control freak who snooped through phones instead of trusting his wife. That narrative lasted until Nina decided she was done playing nice. She quietly sent several of the women on the street copies of the messages I had shown her, minus the most explicit lines, with a simple note. "If your husband starts acting like Todd, pay attention. Also, if you hear that Mark is crazy, here is why he filed for divorce. People are nosy, but they are not stupid." The next time Todd stepped out front to wave at folks, you could practically see the air around him chill. Invitations to game nights dried up. The guy across the way stopped lending him tools. I overheard someone at the mailbox tell him, "Look, man, I am not getting in the middle, but I am not cool with what you did. My wife is not either," then awkwardly walk away. Social revenge in a cul-de-sac is mostly just the quiet withdrawal of normal neighbor politeness. It sounds small until you are on the receiving end, staring out at a street full of people who used to say hi and now suddenly act like your house is invisible. Kara tried her own narrative spin at work and with mutual friends. I found out from Jenna that Kara had told people I was emotionally distant and borderline controlling, and that she had made a mistake while feeling neglected. Jenna, who had seen the messages when Liam showed her, shut that down. He was working overtime so you could afford stupid wine subscriptions and Target hauls, not ignoring you, she told Kara in front of a lunch table full of coworkers. Also, a mistake is forgetting your anniversary, not repeatedly sleeping with the neighbor while his girlfriend works night shifts to pay that mortgage, she added. That story did not spread the way Kara hoped. Her own sister called me to apologize for doubting me when Kara first started crying to her about how cold you are. She finally admitted there was someone else but said it was meaningless, her sister said on the phone. I told her meaningless people do not text you goodnight from the next house over while your husband sleeps alone, she added. The financial piece, thankfully, went mostly my way because of the prep work. The divorce was not painless, but it was clean. Kara got her car, her personal savings, half of what was in our joint accounts, and responsibility for about half the remaining credit card balance. I kept the house, my retirement, the tools in the garage, and weirdly, the dog bed in the corner, even though we never had a dog because I had always wanted one. There was no alimony. We both made comparable incomes. She tried to push for some share of the equity in the house, but my attorney just slid the prenup across the table and the conversation ended there. That was the twist I had not appreciated fully until then. The document she had insisted on because she did not want to get screwed if you ever blew up financially, turning out to be the thing that kept her from walking away with half my roof after she blew up our marriage. Todd's consequences hit slower, but harder. Without Nina's salary and credit, he could not afford to buy her out of the house, especially after she demanded reimbursement for some of the savings she had dumped into renovations. She ended up selling, and from what Liam saw on one of his endless Zillow stocks, Todd was not on any of the closing paperwork. Rumor was he moved into some crappy apartment across town with a roommate 10 years younger than him. Nina stayed in touch with Jenna and came to a couple of our low-key game nights, not as Todd's girlfriend, but as Nina who will absolutely destroy you at Catan. Watching her laugh on my couch months after that living room ambush felt surreal and oddly healing, like we were both survivors of the same weird, dumb war. About 3 months after the divorce finalized, Kara showed up at my house one evening. I only opened the door because I thought it was a package. She stood on my porch in jeans and a hoodie, no makeup, hair up, looking smaller than I remembered. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped out and closed the door behind me, not inviting her in. "Say what you need to say," I replied. She looked past me into the house like she could still see her life in there. "I am in therapy now," she said. "My therapist says I was chasing validation and using the attention to fill a hole instead of dealing with my own shit. I know I hurt you, and I am sorry I hate that I did this to us," she added. I believed she was sorry, in the way people are sorry when the consequences finally sink in. "I appreciate the apology," I said. "But that does not change anything about where we go from here," I added. Her eyes filled. "I thought maybe if we could start over, go to counseling, really work on things, maybe we could find our way back," she said. There was a time I would have grabbed at that like a life raft, willing to pretend the hole in the bottom was not there. That time was gone. "Kara, I spent months being made fun of in someone else's text thread while you used my house as a staging area for your affair. Even if I could forgive you, and maybe one day I will get there for my own sake, I do not trust you. I do not think I ever will. I do not want to spend the rest of my life wondering whose kitchen you are in every time you say you are having wine with a friend," I said. She flinched like I had hit her. "So that is it," she whispered. "That is it," I said. "You made a choice. I am making mine. I hope therapy helps you figure out why you set fire to your own life, but I am not rebuilding this one with you," I added. She nodded slowly, wiped her face with her sleeve, and stepped back. "You were a good husband," she said quietly. "I am sorry I did not know how to be a good wife," she added, then walked away. I watched her get in her car, drive out of the cul-de-sac for what turned out to be the last time, and felt this weird mix of grief and relief settle in. Healing was less dramatic than the explosion that started it. It looked like boring things. Saturday mornings in the quiet house, making coffee and not checking a joint calendar to see if we had social obligations, going to the gym with Liam after work, and deadlifting our frustrations instead of stewing in them. Finally getting a dog, a mutt from the shelter that I named Murphy, who took it on himself to patrol the fence line like it was his personal mission, fixing up the spare room into a workspace and not a shrine to a relationship that was gone. I started seeing a therapist myself, which I highly recommend to any guy who thinks just toughing it out is a personality trait. Working through why I ignored red flags, why I let myself be gaslit for so long, why my first instinct was to blame myself before I looked at the obvious. It made me angrier for a while. Then, it made me lighter. I did not rush into dating, although people tried to set me up, because apparently a reasonably stable guy with a house and a job is like a unicorn in our friend group. Months later, I did start seeing someone new, a graphic designer Jenna introduced me to who lived across town, and whose idea of a great night involved tacos and sketching in the park, not sneaking around cul-de-sacs with a wine bottle. When I told her about what happened, she just shook her head and said, "People treat love like a backup plan until it is gone," which stuck with me more than any self-help quote ever has. Todd and Kara ended up drifting to the edges of my world, like debris floating out in the ocean after a shipwreck. I still saw them occasionally via social media screenshots someone would send, or a sighting report from Liam that Todd is at the crappy gym now, looks like a sad protein shake. I did not hate them anymore, not really. Hate takes energy I would rather spend on my own life. What I felt was a kind of detached pity and a little satisfaction whenever someone in the cul-de-sac greeted me warmly and then gave their houses side-eye. My revenge, if you want to call it that, was not some grand plan. It was simply refusing to protect their image at the expense of my own sanity, letting the truth sit where everyone could see it, and then walking away to build something better without them. I still walk past Todd's old house every day when I take Murphy out. There are new people in there now, a couple who wave at me when they are out in their yard. We trade plant cuttings, not spouses. Sometimes, when the evening light hits right and the street is quiet, I think about the version of my life where I never checked that side yard camera, never picked up the iPad, let wine and talk stay just vague enough to ignore. That guy is still sleeping next to someone who looks at him like a placeholder. I feel sorry for him, but I am glad I am not him anymore. The version of me who walked out of that living room with a laptop under his arm and his heart cracked open is not the same guy who sits on his porch now with a beer and a dog at his feet. But he is getting there. And he knows deep down that being alone with the truth beats being together in a lie every single time.